Now y'all listen. A woman doesn't truly know her strength until she's standing at her ex-husband's wedding, yes, to the mistress, and realizes she isn't there to win him back, she's there to win herself. And sometimes all it takes is one sentence to remind the room exactly who you are. Well, sugar, let me set the scene. After the divorce, I canceled every card, every tie, every leftover thread that man had connecting him to my life. And wouldn't you know it, 10 minutes after the final paperwork, he was off playing groom to the woman who'd been helping him find himself. But don't feel sorry for me. No ma'am, because what I brought to that wedding wasn't bitterness, it was clarity, dignity, and a sentence so sharp it sliced cleaner than any pair of scissors ever could. Now lean in close. Auntie May's got 6 lessons for you. Knowing when to close a chapter with style is one of the most powerful acts a person can ever learn, and it requires a level of self-respect that is not taught in schools or written in tidy little instruction books. It grows out of experience and strength and the quiet but steady realization that your life is too precious to waste on what no longer serves you. When I looked at my life after the divorce, I knew that the time had come for me to step out of the shadow of the past and into a new reality that belonged to me alone. The first step in that transformation was the decision to cancel every card and every connection that tied my name to his story. I felt a weight lift, as if invisible chains had loosened around me and allowed me to breathe for the first time in years. Some people think closing a chapter is as simple as throwing a box of old memories in the trash, but the truth is that it requires a much deeper clarity. You must look at the pieces of your life and ask which ones reflect the person you are becoming and which ones keep you tied to pain, resentment, or confusion. When I held those cards in my hand, I realized that each one carried a little thread that tied my future to a man who no longer had a place in my journey. Cutting those threads was not an act of anger. It was an act of liberation. The decision to cancel those cards was symbolic, but it was also very practical. Every card represented responsibility that no longer belonged to me. I refused to let my name or credit or peace be dragged into the chaos of a life I had walked away from with purpose. A clean break only works when it is truly clean, and that means removing all the lingering details that can pull you back into conflict or financial risk. There is dignity in taking care of your affairs with precision and honesty. Many people think closure is only emotional, but closure is also administrative. It means looking at every account, every shared tie, every remaining link, and saying, this no longer serves my new life and therefore it must be released. As I stood in the bank handling those cancellations, I felt a clarity wash over me. It was almost spiritual. There was no anger in my heart. There was no bitterness or desire to hurt anyone. What I felt was relief and a sense of coming back to myself. For so long I had been trying to hold together something that had already fallen apart. Letting go was not failure. It was acceptance. And acceptance is the gateway to peace. People often stay in old chapters because they fear the unknown. They fear that closing a door means losing comfort or stability or identity. But darling, the truth is that staying in something that has already ended is like living in a house with no roof. You can pretend the rain is not coming, but eventually it will soak you right through your bones. Closing the chapter is putting up a new roof over your own soul. It is choosing protection over illusion. There is also power in the way you close a chapter. You can slam the door or you can close it with grace. I chose grace not because he deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Grace is not weakness. Grace is strength under control. It is the unshakable knowledge that you do not need to shout or fight or prove anything. You simply choose yourself and you let the world adjust accordingly. When I canceled those cards, I did not make a dramatic announcement. I did not warn him or ask for permission. I simply handled my business because my future no longer required his involvement. Closing a chapter with style also means reclaiming your identity. During the marriage, my identity felt mixed with his. My decisions, my finances, my sense of purpose, everything had been blended into a shared life that did not truly reflect who I was becoming. When I released those financial ties, I felt my own name shine brighter. I felt like I was signing a contract with myself that said, you are in charge now. You are responsible for the life you create from this day forward. There is something powerful about stepping into full independence. It is not lonely, it is empowering. I think a lot of people misunderstand the power of decisive closure. They think it is harsh or too final or too dramatic. But closure is a form of self-love. It says I trust myself enough to walk away from what hurt me. I believe in myself enough to build a future that heals me. When you close a chapter intentionally, you send a message to your spirit that says we are no longer living in survival mode. We are stepping into growth. Another important part of closing a chapter is accepting that not everyone will understand your decision. Some will call you petty. Some will call you cold. Some will insist that you should remain connected out of sentiment or duty or politeness. But baby, sentiment is not a financial plan and politeness is not a life strategy. You must choose what brings you stability and freedom. Other people do not live your life, so they do not get to dictate how you clean it. I also learned that closure is not about punishing anyone. It is about protecting yourself. When you leave doors half open, you invite confusion and drama back into your life. You allow old wounds to bleed again. True closure says I respect myself enough to protect my peace. It is not personal. It is necessary. After canceling those cards, I walked out of that office feeling 10 feet tall. I felt like a chapter had truly ended, not in chaos but in calm determination. And that set the tone for everything that came after, including the day I walked into his new wedding. I was able to hold my head high, not because I wanted him or wanted revenge, but because I had done the work. I had closed my chapter with intention and dignity. That gave me strength that no one could take away. It taught me that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away with your integrity intact. You do not need to carry resentment. You do not need to announce your healing. You simply do the work and allow your actions to speak for you. A clean break is a quiet declaration that you value your future more than your past. Closing a chapter with style also means you stop rewriting the story to make someone else comfortable. You stop making excuses for what happened. You stop trying to fix what broke. You accept reality as it is and you choose to move in a direction that serves your growth. This is not easy. It takes courage. It takes self-reflection. It takes the ability to sit with uncomfortable truths. But once you make that decision, your life expands. The beauty of closing a chapter is that it does not erase your history. It transforms it. You carry the lessons but not the weight. You remember the experiences but you no longer feel controlled by them. The moment you let go of the things that keep you tied to the past, you create space for new blessings to enter your life. You make room for joy that is not tangled with confusion. You create a life that feels like yours again. And let me tell you something else, my love. Closing a chapter with style is not just something you do for yourself. It also sets an example for others. It shows them how to walk away with dignity. It shows them that healing does not require chaos. It shows them that strength can be soft and calm and still powerful enough to change your whole life. When I canceled those cards, I was not just closing a chapter. I was opening a new one. A chapter where I had full authorship. A chapter where I chose the direction. A chapter where I did not need validation from anyone else. It felt like reclaiming the pen after letting someone else write the story for far too long. Looking back, I realized that the act of closing a chapter with style is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. It teaches you discipline. It teaches you self-trust. It teaches you how to walk forward without dragging the past behind you like a heavy suitcase you no longer need. It gives you the freedom to live with intention. It gives you the power to create a life that is built on respect and clarity. And most importantly, it gives you the peace that comes only when you know you have truly let go. Healing is not a quiet, gentle process the way people like to pretend it is. Healing is wild and messy and honest. It is a journey that takes you through every emotion you thought you had already handled and then introduces you to a few more you did not know existed. When I stepped out of that marriage, I thought healing meant peaceful mornings, soft music and long reflective walks. Baby, let me tell you the truth. Healing is not soft at first. Healing is raw. Healing is loud even when you do not speak. Healing is work. Real work. The kind of work that makes you confront the bruises on your spirit one by one. There were days when healing felt like standing in the middle of a storm with no shelter. Days when I woke up feeling strong but went to bed feeling defeated. Days when the weight of everything I had survived pressed down so heavy on my chest that it felt like the air refused to fill my lungs. Healing is not linear. Healing does not follow a schedule. Healing will drag you backwards just to push you forward again. And that is alright, because every stumble teaches you something about your own resilience. People like to say healing is quiet. That is only true when you reach the other side. In the beginning, healing is a loud conversation with your own soul. It is the sound of memories clashing with reality. It is the sound of your heart arguing with your mind about what you deserved and what you tolerated. Healing is waking up at night replaying moments you wish had gone differently and then telling yourself that the past cannot be changed but you can. When I was going through my own healing, I had moments where anger came out like a river. Angry at him, angry at myself, angry that I held on for so long. But anger is not the enemy. Anger is a compass. It points you toward the parts of your life that need attention. Healing is not about pushing anger away. Healing is about letting it speak long enough for you to understand the message behind it. Anger told me that I had betrayed myself by accepting less than I deserved. Anger told me that my boundaries had been blurry. Anger told me that I needed to rebuild myself with stronger foundations. And once I listened, the anger softened. Not because the past changed, but because I did. Healing also brings grief. Real grief. The kind that sits deep in your chest and does not move until you face it directly. I did not only grieve the marriage. I grieved the version of myself that believed in promises that were never kept. I grieved the dreams that were built on shaky ground. Healing often means letting go of the life you imagined so you can embrace the life you were meant for instead. And grief is part of that transition. It washes through you slowly, painfully, truthfully. But when it passes, it leaves you lighter. One of the most surprising parts of healing is the loneliness. Not because you are alone, but because healing requires you to sit with yourself long enough to understand who you truly are without the noise of other people. When the house is quiet and the distractions fade, you face the person in the mirror with honesty. You ask yourself questions that you once avoided. Why did I stay so long? Why did I silence my own needs? Why did I try to fix something that was never healthy to begin with? This kind of self-reflection is not gentle. It is a scalpel. It cuts away illusions and forces you to rebuild on truth. But let me tell you, baby, there is beauty in that loneliness. Because when you sit with yourself long enough, you begin to like your own company. You begin to trust your own thoughts. You begin to see your worth not through the eyes of someone who hurt you, but through the lens of your own strength. Healing makes you your own friend, your own advocate, your own protector. Some nights healing meant crying until my eyes ached and my pillow was soaked. Other nights healing meant binge watching old shows while eating dinner out of a takeout box because life had drained every bit of energy out of me. Healing is not pretty. Healing is human. Healing allows you to fall apart because falling apart is how you learn to put yourself back together in a way that finally makes sense. There were days I felt powerful. Days when I fixed my hair and held my head high and reminded myself that I am still here and I am still worthy and I am still rising. Those days were victories. But healing also had days where I stayed in bed too long or ignored calls or pretended I was fine when I was not. And those days were part of the process too. You cannot rush healing. You cannot polish it. You must live it. People will tell you to stay strong. They mean well, but they do not understand that healing is not about staying strong. Healing is about falling weakness and all and then finding your way back to yourself. Healing is admitting you are hurting instead of pretending you are fine. Healing is removing the mask you wore to survive and allowing yourself to be vulnerable enough to grow. One of the most powerful parts of healing is learning forgiveness. Not forgiveness for him. That is optional. I learned forgiveness for myself. Forgiveness for staying. Forgiveness for ignoring red flags. Forgiveness for loving someone who did not love me well. Self-forgiveness is a heavy key that unlocks the next stage of healing. It says you are worthy of grace. You are worthy of compassion. You are worthy of new beginnings. Healing demands patience. There were moments when I thought I should be further along. Moments when I asked myself why I was not over it yet. But healing does not run on a clock. Healing takes the time it takes. The heart does not heal just because the calendar changes. It heals when you finally allow it to. When you stop running from the pain and start tending to it. When you stop criticizing yourself and start comforting yourself. Let me tell you something important. Healing is intentional. You cannot wait for it to happen on its own. You have to choose it. You have to decide that you want better for yourself and then act on that decision. Sometimes that decision looks like deleting old messages. Sometimes it looks like avoiding places that remind you of him. Sometimes it looks like therapy. Sometimes it looks like journaling. Sometimes it looks like taking yourself out to dinner and remembering you are whole even when alone. Healing is a series of choices. Small choices repeated daily. Choices that slowly rebuild your sense of self. Healing is not quiet because your spirit has to make noise before it can rest. Healing is the feeling in your chest when you confront a truth you have avoided for years. Healing is the trembling in your hands when you finally speak your story out loud. Healing is the shaking in your heart when you release the hope that someone will change. Healing is the firm, steady breath that comes afterward. Healing is every tear, every laugh, every step, no matter how small. Eventually, though, healing does become quiet. Not at the beginning, not in the middle, but once you have walked through the storm, healing becomes a soft hum in your soul. A quiet peace that tells you survived. You overcame. You grew. Healing is the moment you realize that your past no longer controls your present. Healing is waking up without the weight on your chest. Healing is walking into your future without dragging the past behind you. Healing taught me that I am stronger than I ever believed. It taught me that my heart can crack and still beat with hope. It taught me that I can lose a relationship and still find myself. It taught me that my worth does not decrease when someone fails to see it. Healing taught me that I am capable of rebuilding even when everything around me has crumbled. And let me tell you something, baby. Healing also taught me joy. Real joy. Joy that is not tied to anyone else. Joy that comes from knowing I survived something that once felt impossible. Joy that comes from knowing I can trust myself again. Joy that comes from knowing I am finally living life on my own terms. Healing is intentional. Healing is messy. Healing is powerful. Healing is yours. It does not matter how long it takes. It does not matter how many times you stumble. Every day you choose healing is a victory. If you want me to expand key point 3 with the same rules, just let me know. Dignity is the kind of outfit you wear without ever needing to step inside a store. It is stitched from self-worth, sewn with the lessons you learned the hard way and pressed with the heat of every trial you survived. When I say dignity is your best outfit, I mean it is the one thing people cannot take from you unless you hand it over yourself. And trust me, baby, once you learn how to wear it the right way, you will not let anyone tug at the seams again. When I walked into that wedding, I knew I had to show up fully clothed in dignity from head to toe, because that was the only thing standing between me and a storm of emotions. I knew the whispers would be floating through the room like tiny insects. People always have something to say when they think they know your story. They love to chew on gossip like it is sugar candy. They love to watch how you carry yourself in uncomfortable places. And baby, that room was a whole field of uncomfortable. But I stepped in with my chin lifted, letting everyone see that dignity does not shake just because the truth is heavy. Dignity is not silence. People think staying quiet means weakness, but silence can be strength when it is chosen intentionally. Dignity is knowing you could speak but deciding that not every truth deserves your breath. Dignity is understanding that your peace is worth more than winning any argument. It is worth more than proving a point. It is worth more than exposing someone for who they truly are. Because when you act with dignity, the truth has a way of revealing itself without you needing to lift a finger. I remember standing near the back of that hall looking at the flowers, the chairs, the decorations, all put together to celebrate a marriage that had risen from the ashes of mine. My heart felt like it was walking barefoot on broken glass. But dignity told me to breathe steady and walk carefully. Dignity reminded me that I was not there because I needed closure. I was not there because I needed validation. I was not there because I wanted to be seen. I was there because I had already healed enough to stand in a place that once would have destroyed me. Dignity is not something you put on for show. It is not a costume for public places. It is the armor you wear in private moments when nobody is watching. It is the voice that tells you to keep going when everything inside you feels unsteady. It is the choice you make to hold your ground instead of letting pain drag you into pettiness. I could have walked into that room loud and furious. I could have created a scene that would be talked about for years. I could have let revenge slip across my face like red lipstick. But dignity whispered in my ear saying that my peace is too precious to spill on a floor that was never built for me. Wearing dignity means understanding your value. Not the value someone else assigns to you but the value you assign to yourself. And during that season of my life I had to rebuild my understanding of my own worth. I had to look at myself in the mirror and recognize that I am more than the loyalty I gave to a man who did not appreciate it. I am more than the silence I endured in moments when I should have spoken up. I am more than the woman who stayed too long because she hoped things would change. I had to see myself again as a whole woman worthy of joy, worthy of respect, worthy of a life that honored the fullness of who I am. Dignity shows up in small actions. It shows up when you choose to respond kindly instead of harshly. It shows up when you decide to take the high road even when the low road looks easier. It shows up when you resist the urge to pick at old wounds. It shows up when you decline conversations that only feed drama. It shows up when you care for your heart with the same tenderness you once gave to people who did not appreciate it. Dignity also teaches you how to walk away. There is a special kind of strength in knowing when to leave. Not because you lost, not because you were defeated, but because you finally accepted that staying would cost you more than leaving ever would. Dignity gives you the courage to stand up and say this chapter is over and my peace matters more than this pain. When I left that marriage, dignity walked out with me. It held my hand in every lonely night and it pushed me forward when my feet were heavy with doubt. There is something incredibly powerful about dignity because it speaks before you do. People can sense it. They can see it in your posture, in your eyes, in the way you carry yourself. Dignity says you cannot be shaken by the past because you have already learned what you needed from it. Dignity says you will not let bitterness plant roots in your soul. Dignity says you can look at someone who betrayed you and still walk forward with grace untouched by their decisions. At that wedding I could feel dignity like a steady drumbeat inside my chest. It kept my heart from racing. It kept my hands from trembling. It kept me grounded. I watched them standing at the front of the room making vows they had broken with me. I watched the guests smiling, pretending the beginnings were pure. And yet I did not crumble. I did not break. Because dignity held me upright like a strong tree in a fierce wind. Dignity is also about self-control. It is easy to lose control when emotions rise. It is easy to lash out when pain burns. But dignity teaches restraint. Not because you fear consequences but because you respect yourself too much to let others pull you into chaos. I chose to behave with poise because I deserved that for myself. My behavior was not a gift to him or to her. It was a declaration of who I am. A declaration of the woman I had grown into. Dignity is not pride in the sense of arrogance. Dignity is pride in the sense of knowing that you will not trade your self-respect for temporary satisfaction. Dignity tells you that you do not need to explain yourself to anyone who does not live inside your skin. You do not need to justify your decisions to people who were not there for your tears. You do not need approval from anyone who doubted your strength. Dignity lets you stand alone and still feel complete. As I sat in that chair watching the ceremony unfold, I realized something beautiful. Dignity had become my companion, my shield, and my quiet voice. It showed me I could survive heartbreak without becoming hardened. It showed me I could let go without losing myself. It showed me that grace is stronger than anger. It showed me that walking through fire does not mean you must carry the smoke with you for the rest of your life. Dignity is also a gift you give to your future self. Every time you choose dignity, you build a path for the woman you are becoming. You clear the road for her. You leave her stronger than you were yesterday. You allow her to step into a future that is not cluttered with regrets or guilt or unnecessary battles. Dignity is the clean air you breathe after suffocating in a space that no longer fit. People in that room looked at me with curiosity. Some with pity, some with admiration, some with confusion, but what mattered most was how I looked at myself. And I looked at myself with pride. Because I knew where I had been. I knew what I had overcome. I knew that standing there with grace was a victory even if no one else could see the mountain I had climbed to get there. Dignity turns pain into wisdom. It turns heartbreak into resilience. It turns endings into beginnings. When you choose dignity, you choose growth over destruction. You choose healing over chaos. You choose peace over revenge. You choose yourself over everything that tried to break you. And let me say this, baby. Dignity is not a one-time decision. It is a daily practice. Every day you choose to speak kindly to yourself. Every day you choose to release what no longer serves you. Every day you choose to honor your value. Every day you choose to protect your peace. Dignity grows stronger each time you rise above a situation that could have dragged you down. By the time the ceremony ended, I walked out of that room with my shoulders back and my spirit steady. I did not feel small. I did not feel defeated. I felt powerful because I had kept my dignity intact. And that is something no one can ever take away. If you want me to expand key point 4 the same way, just let me know. Your voice is a weapon, but only when you learn how to use it with intention. People often think power comes from speaking the loudest or delivering words like sharp arrows meant to pierce through someone else. But baby, real power comes from speaking with wisdom and restraint. Real power comes from choosing your ammunition carefully. Your voice can build your future or burn your past. It can lift you up or it can sink you deeper into the pain you are trying to escape. And at that wedding where every emotion inside me wanted to burst out like fireworks, I had to remind myself that my voice carried weight. I had to remind myself that once words leave your lips, there is no bringing them back. There is something sacred about choosing silence when silence protects your peace. There is also something sacred about choosing to speak when speaking restores your dignity. The trick is knowing the difference. Healing teaches you the difference. Experience teaches you the difference. And baby, heartbreak teaches you the difference faster than anything else. When I stood in that room filled with faces that once judged me and whispered about me, I knew I could unleash a sentence that would set the whole place on fire. But that kind of fire burns everyone, including the person who lights it. I had carried enough flames in my chest already. I did not want more smoke in my lungs. So instead of letting my emotions take the microphone, I let dignity and intention speak for me. To understand the power of your voice, you have to understand the power of restraint. Restraint is not weakness. Restraint is control. Restraint is the ability to feel a storm rising inside you and still keep your umbrella closed until the right moment. There were times during the divorce when I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs. I wanted to shout every injustice, every broken promise, every hurtful action to anyone who would listen. But your voice is not for the world. Your voice is for you. Your voice shapes your inner landscape long before it echoes through the air. There is a moment in every heartbreak when you learn that not everything deserves a response. Not every insult deserves your energy. Not every lie deserves your correction. Not every betrayal deserves your explanation. There is freedom in letting silence do the work. Silence can be louder than anger. Silence can be stronger than confrontation. Silence can protect you when the truth is too heavy for others to handle. But there are also moments when your voice becomes your shield. When staying silent would leave your soul unprotected. When the weight of unspoken truth threatens to crush your spirit. I had to learn that speaking up does not always mean shouting. Speaking up can be a calm, steady declaration that says, I know my worth. Speaking up can be a quiet boundary that protects your heart. Speaking up can be the single sentence that ends a chapter without destroying your peace. Your voice is not meant for war. Your voice is meant for direction. It guides you. It reminds you who you are. It reveals what you will no longer accept. When I finally found the courage to speak during the wedding, I knew I had one chance. One moment. One sentence. And that sentence had to reflect the woman I had become, not the woman who once cried herself to sleep trying to hold on to a life that no longer held on to her. People underestimate the power of a single sentence. They think transformation requires long speeches, emotional confrontations, or dramatic scenes. But often the most powerful truths can be spoken in one breath. One clear breath that carries the weight of every lesson you learned. One breath that shows you have risen above the rubble. One breath that frees you from the grip of your past. Your voice becomes a weapon not because it creates harm but because it creates clarity. During healing you learn that words can either soothe or wound. They can either build bridges or light matches. And baby, some bridges need to burn while others need to be preserved. Knowing the difference is wisdom. Using your voice accordingly is strength. When you speak from a place of pain, your voice trembles with hurt and resentment. When you speak from a place of healing, your voice becomes steady like a river that has carved its path through stone. I had to learn how to let go of the need to be right. A lot of arguments begin because people want to win. They want the last word. They want validation from the person who hurt them. But baby, you cannot win a battle against someone who lost themselves long before they lost you. Speaking to prove a point is wasted breath. Speaking to honor your truth is salvation. When you use your voice to protect your peace instead of proving your value, you step out of the battlefield and into your own strength. There is a certain maturity that develops when you learn not to respond to every trigger. At first everything hurts. Every memory, every mention, every thought sets off alarms in your heart. But over time you learn that not every emotional spark has to become a wildfire. Sometimes you feel the pain but you choose not to fan the flames. Sometimes you feel the urge to speak but you choose wisdom instead. That is when your voice becomes a true weapon, a weapon that defends not destroys. Your voice can also rewrite your story. When you repeat the same narrative of pain you stay trapped in that same chapter. But when you begin to speak hope into your life you create space for new beginnings. I used to say things like I cannot believe this happened to me. I used to speak like a victim of my circumstances. But healing taught me to shift my language. I began saying I survived this. I grew from this. I am becoming stronger because of this. My voice stopped repeating the past and started shaping the future. People often think that speaking is the same as being heard. It is not. Being heard starts with hearing yourself. Listening to your own needs. Listening to your own fears. Listening to your own dreams. Once you can hear yourself clearly, the world begins to hear you differently too. When I walked into that wedding, people looked at me with eyes full of assumptions. They expected a broken woman bruised by betrayal. But when I spoke that one line, their assumptions shattered. My voice carried the truth that I was healed. My voice carried the truth that I had grown. My voice carried the truth that I had moved on in ways they could not imagine. A controlled voice is powerful. A focused voice is unshakable. A dignified voice is unforgettable. When you choose your words with intention, they land softly but leave a lasting impression. When you speak with dignity, your presence becomes stronger than your pain. When you speak from healing, your words become a reflection of your strength instead of your wounds. Some people use their voices like fireworks. Loud, bright, and short-lived. But fireworks fade quickly. Real power is the kind that stays. Real power is the soft but steady voice that speaks truth without screaming. It is the voice that holds wisdom in every syllable. It is the voice that knows when to speak and when to stay silent. When to let go and when to stand firm. Your voice is also a form of self-protection. When you create boundaries with your words, you protect your heart from new wounds. When you say no with confidence, you guard your energy. When you say I deserve better, you strengthen your self-worth. When you say I release this pain, you open the door to peace. Words can set you free if you use them with intention. There were so many times in my journey when I wished someone could speak for me because speaking felt too heavy. But learning to use my own voice became part of my healing. It taught me courage. It taught me clarity. It taught me self-respect. By the time I reached the moment of standing in front of my former life, I knew I had enough strength to speak my truth without bitterness. That is when your voice becomes a true weapon. When it no longer carries poison. When it no longer trembles with fear. When it carries power without pain. When the moment came at the wedding, every eye in the room turned toward me. I could feel the air hang still, like the whole place was waiting for a storm. And baby, I could have delivered one. I had enough hurt inside me to destroy the atmosphere. But I chose purpose, not destruction. I chose clarity, not chaos. I chose wisdom, not revenge. And from that space came a single sentence that ended everything without breaking anything inside me. Your voice is a weapon. But the strongest weapon is the one that is used with intention, compassion, and clarity. The kind of weapon that transforms your story instead of shattering it. If you want me to expand key point 5 in the same style with no commas, I am ready. There comes a moment in every woman's life when the dust finally settles and she can look at the ruins around her and say, well, I will be damned, I really lived through that. And that moment right there is what I like to call the turning of the tide. You see, for the longest time you carry hurt like a stubborn old suitcase with a busted wheel, and you drag it behind you through airports and grocery store parking lots and silent rooms and sleepless nights, and it squeals and scrapes and reminds you of everything you have lost. And you keep thinking that maybe if you just grip that handle a little tighter, if you just pull a little harder, if you just refuse to let go, then somehow the pain will mean something. But mercy, child, it does not. Pain is not a badge. It is a weight. And the day you set it down is the day you remember how tall you really are. That is the spirit that carried me to the place where I finally said enough. Enough with the heartache. Enough with pretending. Enough with letting an old story write my new chapters. And that is why I tell you this part as a whole and healed woman. Because once the papers were signed and the cards were cancelled and the fog of foolishness finally cleared, I discovered a steady soft power inside me that I never would have found otherwise. It is amazing what you can hear once you stop listening to the wrong voices. And let me tell you, the quiet voice inside you knows things that your frightened voice never will. That quiet voice speaks truth. It speaks steadiness. It speaks future. It speaks possibility. There is a strange kind of freedom that rises in you when you realize that the very person who once held the power to hurt you now has no such reach at all. It is like stepping out from under a long cold shadow into warm sunlight. You feel it on your face, and your shoulders, and your tired heart, and your bruised spirit, and you think, good Lord, this is what peace feels like, and I have been starving for it. I tell you, there is no feast like the feast of peace. It nourishes places in you that you forgot existed. It fills gaps that you thought would stay empty forever. It teaches you that you get to be whole without permission from anyone. When a woman learns that forgiveness is not a gift she hands to someone who wronged her but a gift she hands to herself, she becomes a force that confuses every fool who underestimated her. I forgave him not because he deserved it but because I refused to let bitterness rent a room in my soul any longer. Bitterness is expensive rent and it charges interest daily. I freed myself because it was the only sensible thing left to do. And once you free yourself, honey, you see everything differently. The world gets brighter. The air gets lighter. The future gets wider. You stop walking like you are trying to tiptoe past broken glass and you start walking like you own the damn sidewalk. Healing does not happen in one grand revelation. It happens in small brave choices. Choices like waking up and making breakfast for yourself even if you ate toast over the sink for a week straight. Choices like cleaning the house not because someone else expects it but because you want your space to smell like fresh beginnings. Choices like laughing out loud again even when you are afraid the sound might crack whatever fragile hope you have left. Choices like saying no. Good Lord, the power of no. No to old triggers. No to old patterns. No to invitations that feel like traps. No to obligations that steal your peace. Every no you speak with confidence becomes a yes to your future. There is this funny thing that happens when you stop looking back. The past gets smaller. It shrinks like fabric in hot water. It loses its grip. Those memories that once felt like heavy chains become nothing more than faded stories that you can set on a shelf like old books that no longer sting to touch. They do not disappear. They just lose their power. And that is the moment you realize that the version of you who survived all of that is the same version now steering your life forward. She may be bruised but she is also wiser than thunder and twice as steady. I learned to celebrate myself in ways I never even thought of before. Not the kind of celebration that needs balloons or glitter but the quiet steady celebration of knowing that I did not break. That I grew instead. That I kept breathing even when my chest felt tight. That I kept walking even when the path seemed dark. That I kept dreaming even when someone tried to make me believe dreams were childish. Childish dreams are the most sacred. They come from the part of you that still believes in miracles. And let me tell you, I found miracles in the most ordinary moments. Sunlight on the kitchen counter. Warm coffee on chilly mornings. Clean sheets after a long day. Seeing my own reflection and recognizing strength instead of sorrow. Those are miracles too. And then there comes a day, a very special day, when you wake up and realize you are not healing anymore because you are healed. You are no longer patching leaks in your spirit because the vessel is whole again. And you do not have to announce it to anyone. Your life speaks for you. Your smile speaks for you. Your peace speaks for you louder than any sentence thrown across a wedding reception ever could. Because true healing is not loud. It is sure. It is grounded. It is rooted. It is unshakable. People love to watch the fireworks of drama but they never pay attention to the quiet strength of recovery. They never see the long nights of self-reflection. They never see the prayers whispered into pillows. They never see the tears wiped away in silence. But they do see the aftermath. They see the glow. They see the confidence. They see the woman reborn. And that glow, honey, is worth more than diamonds. It is the shine of a soul that knows its worth. A soul that will not settle for anything less than honesty, loyalty, joy and peace. When I say I walked into my future with my shoulders back and my head high, I do not mean in arrogance. I mean in certainty. Certainty that my story is not defined by betrayal. Certainty that love, even when it fails, teaches invaluable lessons. Certainty that my heart has more chapters and better ones ahead. Certainty that the universe does not close one door without pointing you toward another much better one. And certainty most of all that I am enough exactly as I am. You learn things about yourself after heartbreak. You learn how strong you are. You learn how much you can endure. You learn that you can rebuild from rubble with your bare hands if you must. And you also learn what you will never accept again. Boundaries become sacred lines drawn with fire. Standards become clear as water. And you realize that you are not hard to love, you were just loving someone who did not know what to do with abundance. So yes, I stepped forward into my life with grace. Not the dainty fragile kind of grace, but the fierce unstoppable kind that grows in the soil of survival. I carried no anger, just wisdom. I carried no regret, just clarity. And my future welcomed me like an open road under a golden sky. And that is what I wish for every woman who has ever had to stand up, shake off the dust and reclaim her life. Walk forward even if your knees tremble. Walk forward even if your heart remembers. Walk forward because the future is waiting and it has gifts you have not dreamed of yet. That is what healing looks like. That is what rising looks like. That is what freedom feels like. And honey, it feels so good. Now child, let me tell you something about endings, because folks love to pretend that once the dust settles and the flames die down and the signatures dry on the papers, that everything simply goes quiet. But that is not the truth. Not at all. The truth is that endings ring like church bells in your soul. They echo. They vibrate. They shake loose all the fears and doubts and hidden strengths that were packed too tight inside you. And if you listen closely, you will hear something else in that echo. You will hear beginnings. Beginnings are shy though. They whisper while endings shout. But their whisper holds more promise than any roar. You see, after all the storms and heartaches and hard truths came flying at me, I reached a place where I had to decide what kind of woman I wanted to be going forward. Not the woman who survived. No, survival is only the first chapter. I wanted to be the woman who thrived. The woman who bloomed in places no one expected. The woman who made people ask, how in the world is she still standing so tall? And the answer to that question is simple. I stopped waiting for the apology I knew would never come. I stopped expecting clarity from a man who could barely tell the truth to himself. I stopped trying to rewind a story that should never have been on repeat in the first place. And when I stopped all that heavy lifting with no reward, I finally felt something sweet wash over me. Relief. Pure and honest relief. But new beginnings require bravery. Quiet bravery. The kind that does not look like heroism from the outside. The kind that does not ask for applause or recognition. It is the bravery of saying, I will try again. I will believe again. I will rebuild something beautiful for myself. I will hold my own hand through the darkest parts of the night. That kind of bravery is what moved me into the next season of my life. A season with purpose. A season with joy. A season with a door so wide open that sunlight spilled across everything I touched. Let me paint this picture for you. It is the first morning after the last argument. Silence sits in the room like an old friend waiting to speak. You stand there with a mug of coffee and your whole future wide open. It feels strange, and lonely, and powerful. That is the moment when you realize there is no one left to lie to, no one left to placate, and no one left to tiptoe around. You can finally breathe, and breath tastes different when it is free. It is richer, warmer, wiser. That first breath of independence is the beginning of a brand new life, even if it does not look glamorous yet. I started to rediscover myself in tiny ways. Little rituals of freedom. I rearranged my furniture. I bought new sheets. I cooked meals that I actually wanted to eat instead of meals I made out of habit. I sat outside in the evening and listened to crickets and felt the night breeze as if the whole world was trying to comfort me. I read books just because they made my soul feel full. I took long, slow walks under trees that seemed to know more about resilience than any person ever could. And through all those quiet moments, I noticed something changing inside me. I was not just healing anymore. I was growing. And growth, my dear, is the most powerful comeback there is. People think new beginnings happen all at once like a firework. But no, they unfold like sunrise. Slow at first, almost shy, then brighter and brighter until suddenly everything is golden. That is how my future welcomed me. With gold. Not the kind you wear on your fingers, but the kind that wraps around your heart and tells you that better days are not coming, they have arrived. Every time someone asked me how I managed to rise after so much heartache, I told them the truth. I rose because I stopped feeding the memories that kept me small. I rose because I stopped letting the actions of someone who did not value me determine my worth. I rose because I finally knew in my bones that peace is not something you wait for. It is something you build. One choice at a time. One boundary at a time. One brave sunrise at a time. And let me say this real clear for any woman who needs to hear it. You do not need permission to start over. Not from your past. Not from your pain. Not from the people who disappointed you. And certainly not from the man who broke your heart and walked himself right out of your story. You only need permission from yourself. And once you give yourself that permission, child, there is not a force on earth that can stop you. I found myself smiling again for no reason at all. The kind of smile that comes from a deep, quiet place inside that knows something good is growing. I found myself laughing more often because laughter feels different when you are no longer afraid of being misunderstood or dismissed. I found myself dreaming bigger than before because I was no longer attached to someone who clipped my wings to keep me reachable. And the funny thing is, those dreams started turning into plans. And those plans started turning into actions. And those actions became the stepping stones that led me toward a future I never imagined but somehow always deserved. There is a moment in every new beginning when you realize that the old story does not hurt anymore. It may still exist. It may still carry lessons. But it no longer bleeds. It no longer steals your sleep. It no longer whispers doubts in your ear. And that moment is when you know for sure that you are standing at the threshold of transformation. That you are about to walk into a life that fits you the way a well-loved coat fits your shoulders just right. And here is another truth that surprised even me. Once you let go of what broke you, the universe starts handing you blessings that feel tailor-made. Not because you earned suffering, but because you survived it. And survival shapes you in ways that make you more open, more ready, more grateful. I started to notice kindness more. Kindness in strangers and kindness in friends and kindness even in myself. I started to appreciate the beauty in simple things. Clean water, quiet mornings, safe evenings, honest conversations. I realized how precious it is to have a peaceful home where no one is shouting or accusing or undermining your joy. Peace became my new luxury. And I wore it proudly. And let me tell you something about newfound peace. It attracts good things, people who respect you, opportunities that align with you, dreams that once felt impossible because you were too busy holding up someone else's world. When you hold up only your own world, it becomes lighter, brighter, and more sacred. Starting over taught me something vital. Closure does not come from others. Closure comes from the moment you choose to stop circling the same old pain. It comes when you accept that the past cannot be rewritten and does not need to be. It comes when you say there are better chapters ahead and I deserve every single one of them. That is when life starts blooming like wildflowers after a long rain. And child, do not ever let anyone tell you that your story ends with heartbreak. Heartbreak is only a plot twist, not the final page. The final page is written by the woman who rose from that heartbreak stronger than she thought possible, softer where it mattered, harder where it was needed, and wiser everywhere else. That woman is unstoppable. She is unshakable. She is unforgettable. So yes, I walked into my future with hope. Real hope. Not the fragile kind that trembles at disappointment, but the sturdy kind that knows its own strength. Hope that said this new life is yours, go claim it. Hope that said your best days are not behind you, they are marching toward you with open arms. Hope that said you are allowed to be happy again and again and again. And that is the truth of new beginnings. They are not loud. They are not flashy. They are not dramatic. They are steady, honest, blooming things. They grow from your courage, from your resilience, from your willingness to love yourself more deeply than you ever loved someone who failed to love you back. My story did not end at that wedding or in that courtroom or in that moment of heartbreak. My story began on the day I chose myself. On the day I stepped out of the wreckage and into my own becoming. And childed is a beautiful becoming.